So welcome to our first HR Club of 2024. We've got some great clubs coming up this year. We're really excited about this session. So we are going to hear from Megan, who's one of the HR consultants in the NQHR team. And we are delighted to be joined by Sue Turner, who is going to talk to us about all things AI in HR. So Sue has had a fantastic career and is rated in the world's top 100 women in AI ethics, and one of the first 14 people globally to be accredited in the Foundations of Independent Audit of AI Systems. She established AI Governance Limited in 2020 and advises businesses and policymakers on pragmatic AI, data ethics and governance issue, and thinks about making a positive impact on society through that work. So we're really happy to have Sue with us and to be thinking about some of these issues. Before we get into the session, I just wanted to tell you very briefly about the next session so that you can get it in your diary. That is going to be on the 16th of May, and we're going to be joined by Sarah Cook, who is somebody who works in the NQHR team and is an executive coach. So we're going to be focusing on the benefits of executive coaching for colleagues and for people that you may be working with. So that will be a great session as well. Okay, Ellie, could you move on to the next slide, please? And the next one, please. Sorry, and the next one, brilliant. So before we get stuck into Sue's session, we thought it'd be useful to hear a little bit from you about how you may be using AI within the workplace, if at all. So we've got a couple of polling questions. So does your organisation have policies in place to regulate AI in the workplace? If you could answer that for us, that would be great. Excellent. That looks like most people have voted. So can we have the next slide on that one, Ellie, please? Ellie, did we get, there we go. Okay, we've got the second slide. We will be able to give you the outcomes of those polls when we do some follow-up. So the second one, is your organisation using AI in any of the following areas? Recruitment, onboarding and offboarding, performance management, learning and development. If you could answer on that one as well, please. Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. That's really helpful for us to understand a little bit about how you may be using AI within your workplace currently. Right, could you go on to the next slide, please, Ellie? Okay, we're going to hand over to Sue now, and I know, Sue, you're going to be sharing your slides. So, Ellie, we are going to hand over now to Sue, who will take us through the session. Thank you so much.
Brilliant, that's great. Thanks ever so much, Caitlin, and thank you everybody for joining today, much appreciated. I'd like you to start by imagining it's 5 years from now, 2029, and your organisation is filled with people who are confidently using data and AI-powered technology to reveal hidden insights that make your organisation more efficient. And because of your work, your organisation uncovers patterns about your people, your resource management's more efficient, your costs have been cut, and you've got more diverse people who are a better fit. And you can personalise your approach to things like learning and development to get the best out of people and help make your organisation a really great place to work. And for you, well, your leadership's valued like never before because you're right at the forefront of using technology to increase productivity and to innovate. Now, that may sound like an overly rosy future, but I believe we can all get there. And the route to this future is artificial intelligence. And there's 3 things that everyone needs to grasp hold of to get us to that future. First of all is understanding what artificial intelligence is. Secondly is knowing what the opportunities are to use it. And thirdly is having a really good understanding of the threats. So that's what we're going to look at over the next 50 minutes or so. And we're also going to look at why AI ethics matters and give you some tips on how you can move forward with using AI in your own organisation, whether that's private sector, public sector, not-for-profit. And the aim really is that you gain understanding of how AI is reshaping the world, and you can continue those discussions then in your organizations about how you might use it with wisdom and integrity. We've got 2 quizzes, so be ready to click on the raise hand button in a few moments' time, where you can join in with those quizzes and say what you think the right and wrong answers are. And please feel free to use the chat as we go along. I'll try and keep an eye on it here, but Caitlin or Ellie, do please interrupt if there's something there that I don't see as we go along. And well, let me just tell you a little bit about my background. I mean, Caitlin's given you a little bit there, but basically I've spent 50% of my career working with very dynamic, very entrepreneurial businesses, and 50% helping not-for-profits. And what I try to do is help the businesses operate with more purpose and stronger values, and help the not-for-profits take some of the entrepreneurial tools that we see in the business sector and use them for their own needs and gain. Throughout my career, really, I'm a chair of one organisation, non-executive director of another, I've been a chief executive, and I've always been frustrated that we create data in silos in our organisations, and then we keep it in those silos. And as a leader, you just feel, oh, if only we could read across those silos, we'd be able to find insights that would really help us move the organisation forward. According to the UK government, a survey they did last year, 26% of businesses are using data to generate insights. But 81% of businesses are actually actively collecting data. So we're collecting all this data and doing very little with it. It's frustrating. This came to a head for me in 2018 when I was chief executive of one of the UK's oldest and largest community foundations. And there, amongst other things, we were giving out about £5 million a year in grants and getting wonderful feedback reports from people about the difference that the grants had made. And some of it was easy to analyse because they'd given us numerical answers or chosen from drop-down boxes. Fine, we could analyse that. But the real gems, the real stars of the show were the stories people told us about the difference that our grants had made to their lives. And this was unstructured text in the data science jargon. And I'd heard about natural language processing, which is one type of artificial intelligence, which is really good at finding patterns in that sort of text. So I tried to get a university, Bristol University, to help me plug my data into the machine, but that just didn't work. Nobody, to cut a long story short, nobody could really help me to take this forward and use artificial intelligence on my data. So then in 2019, I heard the government were creating new master's degrees, MScs, in AI and data science, specifically to bring people with diverse backgrounds, different lives into the AI and data science sector, because these are conversion courses. So I put my hand up and I was in the first cohort of people to go on this new master's course. And it was an amazing time. Everything from learning to code through to talking about AI ethics and looking at some of the very latest techniques and algorithms that were being used. And at the same time, I set up the company AI Governance because I realized coding all day is fun, but it's not really why I'm on this planet. So the company's mission is to inspire as many people as possible to use artificial intelligence with wisdom and integrity. So from business education to board development to consultancy, that's what we do. So I want to get on to looking at what AI is. I'm going to start sharing my slides so you can see those. That should be up on your screen now. Did you know you are using artificial intelligence every day? Spam filters, for example, the filter that decides whether something goes into your spam email box or actually comes into your inbox, that's using artificial intelligence to try and look at the patterns of words, the way things are written, to decide what might be spam and what's not. Google Maps, if you use that at all, I use it quite a lot, going out and about to see people. It's using artificial intelligence to make the prediction gathered from lots of information about what your best route is and how long it's going to take you to get to where you want to go. And even Google Street View, when you click on that, you might be thinking, oh, I'm looking at the image that a camera-equipped vehicle took as it went down my street. Actually, what's happened is it's used artificial intelligence to stitch together lots of different images that the cameras have captured. So you see the realistic view of what the car would see or what you would see walking down the street. That's not actually what a single camera has captured. It's stitched together. So what is AI? Well, the idea of machines that can learn has been around since the 1950s. But even though it's been around all that time, there's still no single definition of what artificial intelligence actually is. Broadly, we're talking about computers finding patterns hidden in large amounts of data and then using those patterns to predict, to personalize, or to automate things. So give you an example of that. Netflix, if you use Netflix, then it makes recommendations to you of films you might want to watch. What it's doing there is it's finding patterns in what millions and millions of Netflix subscribers have watched and said they liked. And then it's saying, well, what type of person are you? How do you fit into this pattern? And what prediction are we going to make about what you might want to watch based on what people similar to you have watched and enjoyed in the past? And to give you an example in healthcare, lots of uses of AI in the healthcare world. We talk a lot about training an artificial intelligence model. So this is an example from the healthcare world where we can use artificial intelligence to detect signs of cancer. And what we do here in the training process is show the computer two sets of images, one marked has cancer and the other marked no cancer. In traditional computing, you'd have to tell the computer what is a cancer cell, what does it look like, what should you look for. With artificial intelligence, we don't do that. We say, train yourself, work out for yourself. What's the difference between the images that are in one classification compared to the images in another classification? The computer can work out the difference for itself. And then when we show it images it's never seen before, it can predict which ones have cancer and which ones don't, even though there's no labels on them. And it can do that as well as a highly trained human. So this is all about building up probabilities rather than actual certainties. That's the big difference between how AI works compared to normal computing. It's about statistics and probability. To give you an example from the business world, Harley-Davidson wanted to see if they could predict which new customers coming into their showroom or coming onto their website would be their high-spending customers. And they thought if they could do this, well, that would be amazing. They'd be able to focus the attention on the high-spending customers. So first of all, they looked at their past data to see, is there a pattern? Can we tell who's high spending and who's not from some sort of pattern that the computer can figure out? And they found there was a pattern. They then used this when new people came into their showroom or onto their website. And as this press cutting from Harvard Business Review shows, it increased their sales leads by almost 3,000%. Now, this news story came out in 2017, so that just shows these tools and techniques have been around for quite a while, even though the hype in the media has only been going for the past 18 months or so. So what sort of questions can AI answer for us? Well, there are many, and we use different algorithms according to the question that we want to get answers on. So first of all is classification, and that's when we want to know what category to put something into. So working out whether images of lungs show cancer or not, that's a classification task. One project I've worked on is with a major logistics business, and what we wanted to do was make workers there safer because it's quite a dangerous environment. So we used AI-powered computer vision to classify worker behavior into safe and unsafe, and then we could take action to correct the unsafe behavior. This has dramatically increased the number of, decreased rather, the number of safety incidents in the area of the company where we've been piloting the technology. So it's had a real human impact straight away. Second type of algorithm we might use is called clustering. And that's when we don't quite know enough about people to categorize them as we would do with classification, but we think there's some characteristics that people have in common. So we use that, for example, when we buy health insurance. That's used to figure out what group does the person wanting a quote for health insurance fall into? What sort of characteristics have they got that make them similar to other policyholders, so we know what premium to quote them on? Next, there's regression. You may have come across that in all sorts of different environments, not just artificial intelligence. And that's where we say, well, does one factor that we know about in our data, does that relate to one or more other factors? So, for example, if I'm an ice cream seller and I know that next week's the school holidays and there's lots of activities going on in the centre of Bristol and the weather's going to be great, can I use this regression approach to predict how much ice cream I'm going to sell next week? Fourth, there's anomaly detection, and that says, does the data we've got fit into a pattern of what's normal, what's inside the circle there, or not? So a bank could use this to trigger a warning if my credit card's used in a country where I don't normally use it. That's outside my normal circle. Fifth, there's recommendation. That's given what the data tells us, what's the next best step? So given what you've watched recently on Netflix and knowing what films people like you enjoy, what film does Netflix recommend to you next? Or given what products customers have bought in the past, what product are you going to recommend a customer to buy next? And then last but not least, there's generative artificial intelligence, and that goes beyond prediction and automation that we're used to in machine learning types of algorithms, to create new images, to write books, make music. And we'll talk about generative AI a bit in a few moments. Now, there's lots of myths about artificial intelligence. I'm going to give you 3 and debunk those. And then we're going to have a quick true or false quiz to see if we can debunk some more myths for you. So the first myth is lots of people think AI is smart. You may have heard that the Americans have crossed artificial intelligence with a chocolate digestive, and apparently it's one smart cookie. Oh, dreadful. AI jokes are not great. And AI ways of working really aren't smart. Computers don't have common sense, they don't have our knowledge of the world, and they can't appreciate nuances like what it feels like to bite into a juicy apple. They can be incredibly creative. So services like Midjourney can design art, and other services create music and text. AI at the moment hasn't been great at jokes, but it's starting to get the idea of humor, hopefully better than the joke I just told you. The second myth is people think AI and robots are the same thing, but they can be, but not always. So lots of robots just mechanically do the same process again and again and have no artificial intelligence involved at all. They don't learn anything. And similarly, lots of artificial intelligence happens without a robot being attached to it. It's inside a computer. There's no robotic arm or anything like that being attached to it. The third myth is people think AI can do anything. It can't. It can't do every single task. Firstly, if there's no pattern for it to latch onto, then artificial intelligence isn't going to work. And secondly, the type of artificial intelligence that could do anything, and when people talk about the risk from artificial intelligence taking over the world, what they're talking about there is artificial general intelligence, something that could generalize for some principles and do anything like our human brains can, but faster and even better. We don't have artificial general intelligence at the moment. We have what's called narrow AI. So a self-driving car, for example, pretty complicated, lot of different AI techniques needed to make a self-driving car work, but it can't write a poem. So it's narrow, it's confined to the task we've set it up to handle. My view is that artificial general intelligence is probably quite some way away, and we need regulations and controls to be putting forward now so that we can think about what harms we might create with AI in the future. But we don't need to worry too much about artificial general intelligence in our world today. So time for a quick quiz. Do use the hands up button to say whether you think the following things are true or false. So one by one. Firstly, artificial general intelligence is used in self-driving cars. Click the raise hand button if you think that's true. Yeah, I've got some hands going up. Thank you. Okay, that's great. You've got to pop those hands down now. Who thinks that's false? Who thinks artificial general intelligence is not used in self-driving cars? Okay, so it looks like more people think it is than isn't. Well, actually, that one's false. We don't have artificial general intelligence at the moment. We have foundation models, things like ChatGPT that we'll talk about in a moment, that we can build things on. But there's no artificial intelligence at the moment that can do everything. So in our self-driving cars, we have lots of different narrow artificial intelligence that's trying to cooperate together to make a self-driving car work, but it's not artificial general intelligence. Got to pop those hands down. That's great. Second question then is, you can use artificial intelligence without being able to code. Who thinks that's true? Lots of hands going up here. Yeah, I think we've got to pretty much a majority there. So I will say yes, the majority of you, you're right. We can use artificial intelligence without being able to code. We can use tools that contain artificial intelligence without knowing any code at all. And there's lots of things called low code or no code applications where we can bolt things together just using ordinary language without knowing any code. The machine's doing the code behind the scenes. So the third question there, if you want to pop your hands down from that one. Third question is, according to the World Economic Forum, AI will create more jobs than it replaces. Who thinks that's true? Okay, some hands going up, thank you. Okay, we've put those hands down. So who thinks that's false? Who thinks that AI is actually going to destroy more jobs than it creates? Yeah, More people thinking that. Yeah. Well, I'll show you on the next slide the results of the World Economic Forum survey. So what they found actually was that AI is going to create more jobs than it destroys. And we have a slide deck, so we'll make sure this comes out to you. You can look at this slide in a little bit more detail. There's a QR code I've popped on the screen there, so if you want to scan that, you can just grab that and have a look at that report in some more detail. But they reckon that there's 97 million new jobs by 2025 that will be created by AI, and 85 million jobs being displaced. And that's including things like data entry and administrative jobs. So if you've got people in your organization who spend their time perhaps collating information from different parts of the organization, then passing it around colleagues, that's exactly the sort of job that AI is much better at than humans. If that's part of your job, then I know lots of people say to me, oh, my job's under threat. Well, it might be, but if you can figure out how to use AI, then you're in the group of people with the skills that's needed in this new world we're creating. Let's talk a bit about generative AI. The video that's just started here, got no sound on it deliberately, but it shows generative AI in use. So this person you see talking on the screen here, it's not a person, it's an avatar. He's never existed at all. And this is using a tool called Synthesia. I use it to make training videos, and it's a really simple way to generate a script using artificial intelligence, and then use the artificial intelligence to put the images together with it and make the avatar's mouth appear to move in sync with the words on the video. Couple of problems with it to highlight, and this is not just with Synthesia but other tools as well. Firstly, if you ask it to generate the script, which we did for this test on talking to companies about using generative AI, it wasn't very good. It wasn't good enough for a business, for a workplace audience. So we decided to have humans write the script. Secondly, if you watch it with the sound turned up, you'll see that the mouth movements of the avatar are not perfect, they're not spot on. You can tell there's something a bit off. So if you wanted to do something that was really perfect, you've got to wait till the technology advances a little bit more. And thirdly, we chose to declare that artificial intelligence was used to make this video. Being transparent about when AI is used is a really important part of AI ethics. So we have a screen that comes up at the end of this that tells people humans wrote this script and artificial intelligence was used to generate it. So there's three key things that give generative AI its superpowers. So that's things like ChatGPT. The three things that give it its superpowers are it's trained on enormous amounts of data. It uses what's called transformers. So a large language model like ChatGPT looks at a whole sentence, a whole paragraph. It masks out words and guesses what word that it can't see could be. And then it checks, oh, did I get it right? And it learns from that. It's building up the numbers for probability of getting things right. So it's better next time. And the third thing is they have what's called attention. That means they retain a sense of the context of a sentence. So the next sentence, the next one, all fit within a context. And all this allows generative AI models to learn from data and create entirely new outputs, such as text, images, music, based on patterns they've discovered. So the key thing to remember about generative AI, it's still making predictions. It doesn't know what the truth is. So if you say, well, what trends are going to change the UK university sector in the coming years, you'll get an answer from ChatGPT. What it's done is it's learned from the whole of the internet to pull ideas together for you. So its answer can be wrong. So think of generative AI as a giant prediction engine. It's not surfacing the truth from somewhere. It's putting words together in an order that is quite likely, but it might not be the truth. We've seen a massive acceleration in AI capabilities over the past couple of years. To give you an idea of context, it took photographers 150 years to create 15 billion images. Artificial intelligence has done that same thing, create 15 billion images in less than 2 years. So we're accelerating data creation hugely. Now, despite the popularity of AI tools like ChatGPT, a recent survey has revealed that less than 60% of people have used them or are aware of them. So, that means that not everybody's using these tools despite the hype in the media. However, there are ways that we can use them which will be really powerful, which I'll come on to in just a minute. Quickly first, I think actually for time, I'll leave this second quiz out. I won't do the hands up, but just to tell you that the prompts you feed into generative AI, they are quite often not private. So some generative AI tools they are, but you can't control quite often what happens to the words you feed in. So we always tell people not to input sensitive or confidential data. An example of this happened when generative AI really first came onto the market. A Samsung engineer put some proprietary computer code into one of these engines and said, hey, debug my code for me. It's actually a really good use of generative AI. They are brilliant at debugging code. But the proprietary code that the engineer put in, well, that should have remained secret and confidential within the organization. So be really careful about what you put in there, because you don't know what's happening to it once you've released it. Second one there, generative AI makes it easy to produce deepfakes. Yes, it does, which is why we're really concerned that the 3 or 4 billion people who are voting in democratic elections this year are more vulnerable than ever to misinformation and manipulation. And thirdly, well, generative AI does definitely not always tell the truth. As I've illustrated earlier, it makes things up. It's a giant prediction engine, and it's not always up to date. So ChatGPT, for example, the best known of these models, that stopped being trained in April 2023. So if you ask it about a court case that's happened since last April, or recent changes in HR rules, it doesn't know about them. It's literally never heard about them. So we've got all these tools, we've got all this information and things we can do, but what are we actually going to do with it? Well, we're seeing large companies using computer vision, for example, to help decide who to hire, who to make special efforts to retain, and who to fire. There's a Canadian financial services business I've done some work with, and they did a pilot of using AI to analyse words candidates used in first round interviews to look for key behaviours and then decide who to give a human-to-human interview. The pilot ended in what they called failure after nearly 12 months. I don't think it was a failure. I think they learned a lot from it. But the reason it didn't work for them was 3 things. First of all, it gave an assessment of behaviours, but the company wasn't ready to recruit for portfolio careers. They just needed an assessment of fit for a specific role. And that meant, second reason, hiring managers weren't influenced by the scores. They pretty much ignored them because they were saying, this says I should interview this person for these behaviours, but I'm looking at the CV, it hasn't got the skills I'm looking for. I don't want to interview them. And the third reason it failed was because the candidates didn't like it. It was voluntary. Candidates didn't have to go through this process. 60% of them didn't complete it. So these tools, we've got to take people with us. And the London School of Economics have done a study which shows that candidates think worse of companies when they're using some of these AI-assisted tools. So let's go on to look at some of the opportunities for using AI. Well, first of all, some examples from outside the AR world to the HR world to get you thinking. Transport and logistics are using AI quite a lot. So ships, they've got choices of routes that they could take going around the world. There's a company called Bearing.ai, and they use artificial intelligence to make shipping more fuel efficient. They call themselves the Google Maps for ships. So they're using weather data, ship congestion information, port information, and they feed that through to the captains of the ship to give them a choice of routes. And they reckon this can use up to 10% less fuel, and that could be a saving for a container ship of something like £450,000 a year. Norwegian Air, they did a study thinking again if they could boost fuel efficiency and cut their carbon emissions. And they used AI to, again, monitor information on the ground and feed that through to the captain to decide which route to take the airplane. They reckon they could save 16,000 tonnes of carbon emissions each year if they roll this out across the fleet. In manufacturing, we're seeing companies taking images of the goods that have just been manufactured, and they've trained an AI model to figure out which are the good products versus the defective ones. And then in future, they can use the machine to spot defects much more quickly than humans can do it. According to Gartner research, 76% of HR leaders believe their organization will fall behind if they're not using AI in the next 2 years. So what could really be useful to you? Well, things like writing reports, writing appraisals. We all know how time-consuming they can be. And we've all seen line managers cut and paste text from one appraisal into another. So what happens? The employees receive bland documents that don't reflect their needs and their situation. So we can use AI both to automate and to personalize our writing. Now, lots of people say to me, but I'm really skeptical that AI can write as well as humans. So MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, they've carried out an experiment on exactly this, business writing. So they used an AI tool to write a series of business tasks, quite high-level business tasks, and they had humans do the same tasks as well. Then they also had the machine and the humans working together. And what they found was that when the people and the AI worked together, it cut the time taken to do these business tasks by 30% and more. And the quality of the output was judged to be higher than when humans alone wrote it. So these tools really do work, and they can be very high quality. Now we can use tools in Teams and various different apps to take notes from annual appraisal meetings, to make summaries, to make action lists, and automatically convert the text into a draft appraisal. So if you still have people, line managers, who are writing notes by hand and then taking weeks and weeks to get around to writing up the appraisals, it really is time to try out the AI-powered alternatives. They're not perfect, they have flaws, but they can be a really good time saver in getting you to that good first draft. The Synthesia video tool I showed you earlier, that's brilliant, and there are various others out there as well that are one I've been using lately called Pictory AI. They are amazing at making training videos, so you can really quickly put a video together that gives people updates, that spreads messages throughout the business. Some companies are using AI to make suggestions, so more junior members of staff can quickly gain exposure to the skills that more senior people have. So an AI tool can pop up, perhaps listening into a call in a call center, and it then pops up some suggestions as to what the call handler might want to say next. AI has been used in talent acquisition. If you've got data from people you've hired in the past, you could identify candidates with the highest probability of being successful in the jobs you're advertising today. Have you tried feeding in job descriptions to AI and having it rewrite them for you, perhaps giving a different tone of voice, which might otherwise be difficult to do? We've seen AI being used in onboarding and training and development. So companies are automating the onboarding process and then creating personalized programs that can develop employees' skills and aid their career development too. And I've seen AI used in cutting attrition. One client's analysing data from employees' quarterly reports, engineering data, and other data across the business to find which of the employees who are most likely at risk of leaving the business. They then flag this to line managers who can take steps to try and retain them, and that's cut their attrition and their costs quite significantly. Some big companies who do enormous projects are using AI in resource planning. So they take data from past projects, information they've got about new projects, put that together to help them plan future resources better. And across the board, we're seeing all organizations in all sectors using generative AI to take years and years of information about HR policies, how things are done in the company, how do you book holidays, training, and so on. And they're putting this all together into AI-powered chatbots that provide information so employees can ask questions and get answers 24/7. So, they might be proactively reminded to use up leave, they might amend HR records, like when they move house. You want to have really good human supervision and testing before you release a bot like this, but it's something that's worth exploring. Microsoft last year did a survey of how people were using artificial intelligence, and they found a real focus on using AI to increase employee productivity. Forrester Research has done a survey of leaders, and they found 35% were looking at AI to increase automation of internal processes, and 30% were aiming to improve operational efficiency and effectiveness. So wherever we've got things that we know in our organisation are not very effective, are very manual, can we make them better using AI? But there are problems. And a company I've done a lot of work with in financial services wanted to put a new phone system in a year or so ago, and they put the new system in, having specified it very carefully. A month after it went live, a warning flashed up on the supervisor's screen saying that one of the call handlers was abusing a customer. They thought, wow, that's not the way we do things around here. What's gone on? When they actually asked the call handler what had happened, the call handler said, oh no, that's Mr. Smith. He's profoundly deaf. So he always talks very loudly, and I was talking loudly in response to him. But hang on a minute, why is the computer inside this phone system suggested that this is abuse of a customer? Well, what happened was that the system had artificial intelligence built in, a type of AI called sentiment analysis, that was analysing not just the words, but the tone of voice used in the phone calls to make the prediction that this was abuse of a customer. Nobody told the company through the whole process of procuring the phone system that AI was built into it. And you could have had it set up so that those warnings were just automatically put on the employee's record as a black mark, that they'd committed an offence in the organisation and gone against policy. 3 of those, and perhaps the person could automatically be made redundant or sacked. So there are issues when we set up these tools we need to be aware of. So to run through some of the threats, well, there are many, many awful mistakes businesses have made when using AI. Here's a few just to be aware of. In the United States, a healthcare algorithm assigned risk scores, and the idea was it would help hospitals and insurance companies identify which patients would benefit from being fed through into a special program for those at highest risk. Perfectly sensible. The algorithm's designers used healthcare spending as a proxy for medical needs. So they assumed that the higher the cost, the greater the medical need. But what they hadn't factored in was that Black people were more likely to be poorer and spend less on healthcare. So their needs were high, but their spending was less. They didn't get put through to this program. That was bias against them. In 2019, Apple launched a credit card, which was quickly found to offer women significantly less credit than men. When pressed, Apple couldn't even explain why this was happening. So they went to the issuing bank, Goldman Sachs in this case, and said to them, what's gone on? Why is there this bias? Goldman Sachs said, there can't be bias in this because we're not using gender as one of the factors that we're looking at to allocate the credit amounts. But that's actually showing a fundamental misunderstanding about data and how it works. Just because you haven't got gender, if you think of it as sort of a column in a spreadsheet, just because that isn't there as a column, doesn't mean there can't be bias. There's lots of other things in data that can be a proxy for gender. And in fact, by not having a column which is gender in the data, you're making it harder to look for that bias. So it really showed a lack of understanding about good data governance. And the third one on the screen there is from IBM. They were providing facial recognition technology for policing, but they stopped after independent researchers found racial bias in many of these systems. And very, very recent studies found that facial recognition systems can be biased against disabled people. People with Down syndrome were particularly featured in this research. On the other hand, we do have examples of where organizations are using artificial intelligence really well. Xerox, for example, they wanted to understand their attrition rate and reduce their attrition rate. And they realized that people who were leaving the organization in less than 6 months tended to be people who lived further away from the company's site in a part of America. So they thought, when we're recruiting then, if we put that in as a feature and we make sure we screen people out who live further away, then we're going to cut our attrition rate. True. But a wise person in the company said, hang on a minute, our site here is in quite an affluent area. People who live further away tend to be people who are living in less affluent areas. We actually want to give them the opportunity to come and work for us. And if that means the attrition rate doesn't go down so much, so be it. We are not going to screen those people out. We want them to have the opportunity to work for us. So there's an example of using wisdom and integrity in how you use AI rather than just doing the obvious thing. Let's look at some other risks. Recently, I asked a generative AI image generator to give me a photorealistic image of business people sitting at a boardroom table. The first image that came back was all white males in suits. I don't know about you, but last time I went into a business meeting and it was all white males in suits was a very long time ago. But this showed bias in the data that had been used to train this AI model. So I changed the prompt and I said, give me a diverse group of people sitting at a boardroom table. And this is the image that came back. It really demonstrates AI doesn't have our common sense. Why is the man trapped in the middle of the table? I have no idea. And if you look towards the back right of the table there, there's two people, a man and a woman, whose hands are kind of weirdly merged together. So there's other faults in this as well. But it's a really good reminder to have in our minds all the time that AI, and particularly generative AI, isn't surfacing truth. It's making things up. So some other risks, there's lots on the slide here. I won't go through them all for time, but I will just highlight one or two. Failing to understand that AI gives us a result based on predictions, not certainty, is really, really common. In the United States, 2 lawyers were fined last year because they used ChatGPT in a lawsuit and it generated references for various things they needed to submit to the court. It generated fictional references, not real court cases. They should have checked. It's obvious they should have checked, and they should have edited out the cases that were invented. Last year, I did a presentation to some chartered accountants. So I asked Microsoft's Copilot, that's their version of ChatGPT, for data on how accountants' views of the impact of AI had changed over the past 5 years. And I put a chart together, and it showed concerns rising over 5 years, which is what I was expecting. But I did also check to see, did the research that Microsoft had surfaced actually exist? It didn't. Now, we all suffer from cognitive bias. There's 188 different cognitive biases, including confirmation bias, and that leads us to want to believe things that fit our worldview. So that presentation for the chartered accountants, my own confirmation bias could easily have led me simply to accept that this rising pattern was true. But we've got to be skeptical and check what information generative AI tools give us. In AI circles, we talk a lot about bias, and we're not talking there so much about cognitive bias as statistical bias. And that's when the data we use isn't an accurate representation of what we're trying to study. So if the data isn't accurate, then the results aren't going to be accurate either. I mentioned earlier on one client's piloting AI to aid retention, and what they're doing there, as I've said, I think was bringing together these different internal data sets to spot the performers who are at risk of leaving and take steps to retain them. Now, they've done this through some good-hearted data scientists in the organization, just experimenting. What happens if we put this data together? Is there a pattern? Can we do something useful with it? But they asked me to get involved because they recognized they were getting no top cover, no advice and support from the management and the board of the organization, where there's no controls in place. And they recognized this was a real weakness. So, for example, this company has a union, and one of the first questions I asked when I met them was, what do your unions think about this? And they said, oh, well, we're the data scientists. It's our boss's boss who talks to the unions. We wouldn't have the opportunity to talk to them. Fundamentally, we need to bring people into these discussions at the very earliest stages and not try and bolt them on later when we've spent a fortune trying to create an AI use or just invested our time in it and want it to work. So there's lots of problems that are projects that I see where they don't actually solve business problems. I gave you the example earlier of the one in financial services in Canada, where the company was hiring for skills, but the AI tool was trying to solve for behaviors. And a lot of my time is spent working with leaders to help them figure out what risks they're exposing the organization to. So you can do all sorts of things with AI, but should you be doing them? An example of that from Uber. In some parts of the world, Uber have automated the dismissals process. So a driver simply gets a message on the app that says, you're no longer an Uber driver. No way for them to find out why that decision has been made. No way for them to appeal that decision. In the UK and Europe, it would be against GDPR. We've got a right to opt out of automated decisions that affect our lives, but not everywhere in the world. But somebody somewhere in Uber made an ethical choice that that was the right thing to do. We'll never know who or why. So people really need guidance about how they use AI tools and not just a board policy. I'll stop sharing the slides at that point. I think perhaps if I can pin myself, yeah, then I'll come into the middle of the screen like that. That's good. So why does AI ethics matter? Well, I've given a couple of examples there. We're not trying to automate everything. It's really important that we stay as human organizations and human HR teams. So the underpinning systems behind our activities may be getting more automated, but we've got to figure out where we keep humans in the picture. When I started working in this field in 2020, it was news to lots of people that AI could be more biased than humans if you didn't take care with the data that you use to build the model. We know that now. We know we can have these problems with bias, like the ones I showed you from IBM and Apple and healthcare. So we've got to monitor the use of these tools when we're using them, because they can change. We might start off with something that works really well, but as it absorbs new data, new information, it can go off in a different direction. And it's really important we involve diverse stakeholders right from the earliest stages. We still don't have a diverse workforce in the data science world. Artificial intelligence tends to be young white males, but we are trying to change that by the way we train people and incentivizing people to get into this sector. Regulations are really not keeping up with the pace of change in AI either. So it's up to us, all of us, to choose to make good ethical choices when we're bringing AI into our organizations. I mentioned regulations. I'll touch on that a little bit more. It really is clear that AI needs regulating. In the UK, the government have said, yeah, we want to have a light touch approach. We want to encourage innovation. And that's fine. But they have then said to UK regulators, come up with some new rules. It's very wishy-washy. It's very slow. We don't know what they're going to come up with. In the EU, by contrast, and some other jurisdictions, what we're seeing is much, much clearer rules being laid down. And that helps organizations to comply and know what they're doing is the right thing to do. There are, of course, existing regulations, things like GDPR that I've mentioned, intellectual property rules, and clearly those apply. If you're using an AI tool to screen job applicants, then do candidates need to know? Yes. because GDPR gives people the right to opt out of automated decision making. So they have to know that that automated decision making is taking place in the first place. But there's lots of grey areas where no rules tell us what to do. So if we decide to use AI to automate a process and replicate human jobs, we're going to be making some people redundant. How much weight should we give to the social impact of our AI use? Should we invest in a retraining program for people, for example, rather than just sacking them? In future, we're going to use many more AI-powered tools. So we could do things like analyze employee sentiment on a daily basis. We can scrap the once-a-year staff survey, which has always been rather a blunt instrument, and we can use sentiment analysis, looking at the social, the channels, the communication channels inside our organizations to see how people are feeling. So the chief executive makes an announcement. What sort of reaction do we get to that in our online internal communications? Should we go further than that? Should we actually also analyze people's social media themselves outside work? Should we put that into our tool and analyze that too? We could, but it probably feels like a step too far. And if we're using AI tools for candidate selection, we will need to understand enough about the data the model's built on to be sure it's not perpetuating biases and unfairly discriminating against some people and characteristics. So legally as well as ethically, we humans have got to remain accountable for what the AI use does. Just last week, Air Canada claimed in a tribunal that an AI chatbot on its website was an experiment, and they said it was a separate legal entity responsible for its own actions. And they claimed that the airline wasn't liable for inaccurate information that the chatbot gave. Quite staggering, really. Who else is responsible if not the company that created it? Fortunately, the claim failed and they were held to have engaged in negligent misrepresentation, and they were told they hadn't taken reasonable care to ensure that the chatbot was accurate. So a big slap over the wrist for them. There's a new standard that's recently come out, ISO 42001, and that's focused on helping management look at their AI-related practices. That is actually a good tool to look through. Now, I spend a lot of time with my clients helping them figure out how to approach AI governance and ethics. 91% of organizations have got no controls on their AI use. So we really need to help organizations figure out what the risks are and how to control them. It is a whole topic on its own, but things like thinking about what level of human supervision are we going to give to the tools we use that have AI for HR purposes? How are we going to respond when AI gets things wrong? It's about predictions. Inevitably, sometimes it will get things wrong. So we've had a quick gallop through there looking at what AI is, the opportunities you might use it for, and some of the risks. But how do you get from where you are today to that picture I painted at the start, that rosy picture where you're leading a team who are brilliant at using data and AI to improve your organization's performance? We'll get on to Q&A very shortly, but I'll just give you some ideas for moving forward with AI in your organization. 3 things. Firstly, invest time in learning and development for yourself and for your team. Doing that here today. There are very, very expensive executive education courses available. One of them, the Side Business School in Oxford University, it costs £30,000 to send somebody on that course. A lot of money. But for my company, AI Governance, other companies, we're providing much more affordable leadership education courses because we believe it's important for everyone to be able to get this knowledge, not just an elite few. I've been working with a company to guide them through spotting opportunities to use AI to increase efficiency and to unblock some of their workflow problems. So could you form a group? And it might have people from the distribution side of your business, if you have a sales arm, marketing, communications, IT, HR, obviously, different departments across the business to explore ideas for how you could use AI. And you might include customers so you can test out some simple ideas that are low cost and low risk. You'd want to have some boardroom guidance on this, what can we and can't we do? So make sure you've got buy-in at the top of the organization as well. Second tip for you is get to know your data. I said right at the start and throughout that AI is all about finding patterns hidden in large amounts of data. So all AI projects need data. When you're thinking about how you could use AI in your organization, what data have you got and what business problems do you think it might help you solve? Quite often I find people have got a gut instinct about where there might be a pattern, though we have to be aware of our cognitive biases. And it's really good, again, to work in teams to get different perspectives on what the problems are and how we might use data to solve them. I've said that there's a new standard, ISO 42001, coming through. Once standards are set for AI use, there will be audits of organizations' use of AI against those standards. In New York last year, they passed regulations that any AI tool that is used in automating decision-making in employment has to have an independent audit. So make sure you keep records of how you're using AI today, because you'll be grateful when audits come in the future that you've got those records. My final tip, really, above all, put people at the heart of your ideas for using AI and don't join the war for talent. There aren't enough people out there to just go and pluck people off the shelf to put into your organization to do these tasks. So training, whether it's people in the boardroom or people who are at the coalface in different ways in your organization, training to people to be confident in understanding data and using these tools is really important. I've got one client who need more data scientists in their organization and fewer middle managers. Now, they believe in investing in people. So rather than sacking their generalist middle managers and recruiting in new specialists, they're giving their existing team members training to get better at analyzing and understanding data. And that's good for society as a whole, because we need more data scientists. And it's good for the individual middle managers because they're not put on the scrap heap. They're actually helped to be part of this new changing world. So whatever you decide to use AI for, it's really vital to consider the impacts of AI on your organization, on all your stakeholders, and put people at the heart of how you use it. Okay, I will stop there, and I know some people might have to go at the top of the hour, but we'll carry on for another 10 minutes or so taking questions. So please, is there any questions in the chat, or anybody want to just put their microphone on and ask a question?
Okay, so I've got some questions which have come through in the chat. So the first one for you is, what is the difference, if any, between an algorithm and AI?
Okay, yeah, so algorithm and AI, pretty much we're talking about the same things. So algorithm really can be more than AI. It's a mathematical formula, if you like. So not all algorithms are artificial intelligence, but other way around, when we're talking about AI and building models, the algorithm really is the pattern, the formula, the way we get statistics to figure out how things relate to each other. So AI's always got algorithms in the middle of it, but the other way around, not all algorithms are AI. Some of them are just straightforward maths.
Okay, next question. In order to use AI, do you need certain software programs, or how do you go about starting to use it?
Ah, okay. Really good question. So there are lots and lots of different things that you don't need any new software for at all. You can simply go and try them out. So you might, for example, if you haven't tried ChatGPT, the one that's been in the news so much lately, then definitely just put into a Google search ChatGPT, or there's one called Gemini, which is the one from Google. And you can just try out these tools and see what they're all about. But as I mentioned earlier on, don't upload anything that's sensitive, because they are not safe. They're not confined to the world that you're looking at. And then there's just so many tools. So quite often I'll go in to a company and they'll say, we are working with the sales team, for example, or trying to do business development or HR. What tools can we look at? And then we'll go in with a specific group of different tools for people to try out and experiment with. The other thing I'd add on that one, Megan, is that actually quite often AI these days is being built into the tools you already use. So I was with a sales team last week. They're using Salesforce as their customer relationship management system. So I said to them, Salesforce are building this all in. You don't have to go somewhere else for it and then have the problem of trying to make different systems relate to each other. So again, in HR, what programs have you used? What software are you already getting? Go to your suppliers and say to them, hey, is AI being built into this? Other things that you want to, you're already offering, and perhaps we can be part of piloting things with our organization.
Okay, great. And then another question which came in, but I think this was prior to you actually discussing it as part of the session, but maybe you can add on to it a little bit. One of the questions was, what sorts of governance frameworks do you think HR leaders need to be starting to develop?
Yeah, really, really important question. And so there is nothing off the shelf that you can just pluck off the shelf and go, great, I'll follow this. That's the perfect way of doing it, because it's also new. Standards haven't been set yet. Regulations haven't been set. And so I would always say to people, we'll start with making sure you've got good data governance, and hopefully GDPR respecting organisations, we've got that. But review that then in the light of artificial intelligence. And you need top cover. I mentioned before that you need the board of the organisation to say, this is what we will use AI for, and this is what we won't use it for. These are the sorts of frameworks and guardrails we'll put around our AI use. So starting with the perspective of being human focused, starting with intention of wanting to do good, but recognise AI can also do harm. Those are really good principles to put in place. And then we have what's called a responsible AI framework, which works through different issues to help people focus on things like societal impact, things like environmental impact often gets left out, but you need somebody to help you with a framework that you then work through to put the tools together and make sure everybody in the organisation is clear about what you will and won't do with AI.
Okay, super. I think you also referenced during your session about a AI toolbox, which I think they didn't catch which one it was that you were referring to.
Yeah, I wonder what that was. There's the new ISO 42001. That's the new standard that's just been produced. So very, very new, only came out a few weeks ago. That's a really helpful one. It's guiding you on the management of how you use AI tools. And it's written in very straightforward language. So by collaborating, say, with an IT department, you could easily be looking at that and saying, well, where do we fit in this at the moment? I do work with companies where we talk about the where they are on their journey through using AI. So are they just at the early stages as a beginner? Are they experimenting with tools? And where do they want to get to? You know, do you want to be the experts, the leaders in using these tools, or you're happy to be in the middle of the pack? So thinking about that and getting, again, board cover that says this is our intention of how good we want to be at AI, then allows you to think about how much to put in. But frameworks, I think, on the AI governance website, must be on there. Can't remember which page, but there's an aigovernance.co.uk website, and that will have a framework on there which talks about how to use, how to approach responsible AI.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Sue.
And we could possibly share the link when we do the follow-up from this session. If we can find the link, that might be helpful for people.
Yeah, I'll send it over. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think that's all the questions that we've had in. I can see lots of comments coming up in the chat saying thank you and that's been such an informative session. So really, really helpful. So thank you so much for that. Ellie, please could you just share our final slide? So we always would like to get some feedback from you about how you found the session, and Ellie will talk about that. But first of all, if you are interested in hearing about the HR retainer services offered by NQHR, please do let us know and we will get in contact. And also, we're obviously very happy to talk about other services that we offer. So please just get in contact with me or with Megan. And then I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us. And Ellie is just going to talk through the very short feedback poll that we would love you to fill in, please. Thank you so much.